Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, hit the bell notification, follow the Twitter, follow the stream, and let's just jump into today's video. Context and notes about both Zac changes, Wukong rework, Diana changes, and some follow-up on the Malphite stuff. I'm going to be reading this off of the PBE because it's a rather long post, so if I did my usual style of making videos, this would actually take a long time to get done before the end of today, so unfortunately, we're going to be doing it this way. If it's hard to read because the quality is low, I am going to read it verbatim, so that way you kind of just have to listen if you can't see it, or it's watching it's kind of hard. Sorry about that, but here we go. Starting with Zac. Hello friends. We've been following some excellent conversations regarding where Zac landed after his rework in 2017. After assessing players' feedback, we ultimately decided that we went too far in pulling damage out of him in our quest of a more CC-laden tank. We agreed that part of Zac's pattern of diving the back line and doing damage is core to who he is as a champion, and unfortunately, Zac players felt that after diving in, he wasn't able to accomplish anything more than just knocking people around. With that in mind, we're reverting his reworked ultimate and W. Full change list. Q stretching strikes. Cooldown 13 to 9 seconds from 15 to 9 seconds. The W unstable matter. Now does 2% of the target's max health per 100 ability power as magic damage. R, let's bounce. Removing the old ultimate. The new ultimate, Zac bounces 4 times, gaining 20 to 50% movement speed over the duration, but it's unable to use Q or E and can't attack. The first bounce deals 140, 210, 280, plus 40% AP damage on a target, reduced by 50% for subsequent bounces on the same target. The first bounce is on a given target, knocks them back for 1 second, and all bounces on the same target slow by 20%. The ultimate is a straight revert to what it was before we changed Zac. 4 AoEs, each 1 second after the last, that do damage and knock up once per cast. The W is another revert, where we basically just added in the AP ratio we took out of Q. Or just took out. Q is not being changed, but the cooldown is a little longer to pull more power out of Zac's CC and into his damage. This should open up build paths for AP Bruiser Zac again, although we expect full tank to still be the default build. These changes should be on the PBE soon for testing and feedback, with a tentative plan to ship the final changes in 9.11. We hope to generate some conversation on y'all's opinions on this list, what they are, and go from there. Moving on to Wukong. Meddler provided a context post on prototype Wukong changes testing in the PBE this cycle. Hey folks, whole bunch of detail here on some Wukong changes we're going to be testing for the PBE for a while. First off, some context around them. These changes won't be shipping for at least a while. We're using art that's borrowed from other champions' items because we haven't committed to these specific changes yet. So even if the gameplay we're testing is really well, there'll still be some delay before we ship them since we need to revise the art basically. There are some known bugs present in the modified abilities. Nothing that should have a meaningful effect on testing, but stuff that will feel a bit buggier than normal. Smaller stuff like this, we don't put time into fixing until we see a set of changes we're committing to either. These changes haven't been through a rigorous balance pass, so numbers won't necessarily be representative of what they need to be to ship. The mechanics themselves are intended to be representative, e.g. Wukong's Q heals them, so specific numbers on the heal by contrast might be around or right about, or might be meaningful, too high or too low. We've done enough testing to have confidence that they're not ludicrously off, but haven't pulled them through a full balance assessment. In addition to PBE testing, we're also going to be running this change list past some players on site at some of our offices. That will give a more controlled environment than PBE can offer, more even in competitive games for example, and generate different feedbacks as a result. Finally, this is the gameplay focused update. Things like changing VO, model, full animation update, etc. aren't on the table at this time. We think that sort of work's really important, but our docket's currently full with other champions for it. Some art, audio adjustments are likely, but just those needed to accommodate the gameplay changes. Okay, that's a lot of context that isn't all that interesting to most readers. Apologies, still important to share though. Up next, the goals of his rework. Added a few points of extra mastery to Wukong for those who still want to take advantage of it. Make a bit more use of the trickster elements of Wukong's theme. Improve ability satisfaction a bit. Avoid fundamental changes to things like ability targets, as avoid to significantly more difficult skill floor for new players or relearning large period for existing players. Improve Wukong's counterplay, both laning pattern and reliance on bursting targets. Focus on Wukong players, past and present, more than potential Wukong players. Okay, getting past the context setting, which I'm sure a lot of you skimmed past anyway, and into the change list. Again, numbers aren't necessarily been balanced, so this might be more about the direction of the abilities more than the particular numbers. The passive. Strength of Stone was Stone Skin. Part 1, Crushing Blows. New. Whenever Wukong or one of his clones damages an enemy champion, they apply a stack of Crushing Blows to a target. Targets take 4% increased damage from Wukong and his clones for each stack of Crushing Blows, 5 max, so that'd be a total then of 20%. The visual effects start small at one stack and get larger with each additional stack applied. Part 2, Stone Skin Redesign. When 3+ enemy champions are visible within 1400 units, Wukong gains armor and MR equal to 20 plus 2 per level plus 0.2% his bonus armor and magic resist respectively. Bonuses last for 6 seconds and renews if enemies remain near. Current use the Gargoyle Stoneplate activation visual effect when it's up. So basically what they're saying there is like that's an example of the art they're using is from Gargoyle Stoneplate. So even if people like this ability, they have to go through a new art phase before it releases live, which is why it's going to be delayed even if all of these are liked. So with that being said, continuing. Why these changes? Wukong's live passive is functional, gives him power, influences his itemization, but really low on satisfaction. We like to keep the teamfight survivability aspect though, trying a double passive where both parts hopefully have appreciability and neither need to be as relevant in all contexts for the passive as a whole to feel better. With the defensive bit, giving him armor and magic resist ratios to make mixing in more defensive itemization if desired a more sensible choice. For the offensive part, looking to shift some power on the kit away from team amp and to a personal amp and allow magic damage output, whether from Wukong's kit or elsewhere to feel better. But wait, there's more. Q, Golden Magical Staff was Crushing Blow. Now has a passive where Wukong gets 125 range on his next auto attack after he casts any spell, not just Q. Now deals 20 to 100 bonus magic damage instead of 10 to 130 plus 4% or 0.4 AD bonus physical damage. Now heals for 20 to 60 plus 0.25 AD health halved on minions instead of shredding the target's armor. Well, why these changes? Trying to give him more frequent access to increased range as a way to allow a combat pattern that's both a bit more varied, especially in lane, and doesn't necessarily have to be bursty. Laning pattern also hopefully helped a bit by some sustain on the kit. Expectation is that the basic effectiveness will be pretty easy to access, but extra range will allow a lot of optimizations, especially when combined with other parts of the kit. There's even more. W. Warrior Trickster was Decoy. Clone created now attacks nearby enemies, dealing 50% of Wukong's magic damage instead of exploding for magic damage at the end of its life. Clone lifespan increased to 2.5 to 5, invisibility duration for Wukong himself unchanged. Wukong creating a clone and Wukong pressing S to stop movement will now look identical to enemy players. Can bait them into believing you've cast W when all you've done is stopped moving. Wukong's dash when casting W increased to 200 units was 100. CD reduced to 16 to 8 seconds from 18 to 10 seconds. CD now starts on clone death, not on clone creation. Clone uptime, especially with CDR, becomes too high otherwise. CD reduced so that non-CDR builds aren't too punished. Why these changes? Getting a bit more trickery in and exploring a combative clone as a fantasy win. Increased dash range pairs well with increased auto attack range passive from Q. Clone damage output being more relevant and increased potential for trickery hopefully gives more interesting optimizations. There's even more. Nimbus Strike, the E. Other images of Wukong are now interactable clones, just look like Wukong and can be interacted with like any other unit. That means enemies won't be certain which exact target Wukong himself is going into until he is there. Clones can also block skill shots. AD ratio 0.5 was 0.8. Now check secondary targets for much larger area around primary target. Why these changes? Primarily, we want to enable more trickery and again add some mastery points for those who wish to optimize around, reducing AD ratio both to decouple Wukong a bit from such AD bound builds and also as a result of adding power elsewhere. AD builds should still be decent and not in the extent most other builds aren't worth considering. And then of course, last but not least, the R, the Cyclone. Other spells are no longer locked out when you're casting R. If you cast another spell, it will immediately cancel the ult in progress. Makes it easier to chain spells together basically if you want to end the ult early. So why these changes? Wukong's ult is pretty well liked and short of making it really major changes, wasn't finding any better and strong directions here. Just a small usability adjustment as a result. Considered increasing the damage tick rate given that's a common player request. Concluded it wasn't right call though. And given that the new both binds him in a more Black Cleaver build and pushes him towards more burster damage with his new passive, the knockup by contrast already checks for targets much more often than the damage is dealt, so there wasn't an art responsiveness gains to be had there. Things feedback would be particularly appreciated on. If you're playing as Wukong, how much Wukong have you previously played? Do you feel these changes result in you playing in somewhat different ways? If so, do you enjoy that? And what builds would you be inclined to use with this kit? If you're playing against Wukong, is it clear what's happening in game and how you should play against this version of the kit? How frustrating do you find trickery from this kit relative to trickery from other champions in League of Legends, like let's say LeBlanc or like Fizz, stuff like that? Part 3, Diana. Hey there. This is a follow-up to my last thread on the PvE boards about testing a series of changes to Diana's Q. I've gotten a bunch of feedback and data on it that mirrors live Q's behavior in almost every cases, but should feel faster and more accurate to cast. In the meantime, I've been thinking about ways to add small improvements to Diana's kit to make her more enjoyable overall to play as and play against. Patch 7.14 had significant changes to Diana that brought her closer to being a very single-purpose AP assassin, while also gaining her attack speed behind cast. I want to try to bring back her attack speed to a more normal baseline and reducing reliance on the AP to succeed. And thus, I'd like to propose a small list of gameplay changes that I want to test in the PvE starting next deploy. These changes aren't going live with 9.11, but if anything, that just gives us more time to workshop together. Goals of these changes are as followed: increase Diana's time to kill by a small amount, revert the spell weaving paradigm that was introduced in 7.14, give her more mobility in fights and skirmishes. Here's a change list that we'll be testing initially. The base mana is going up, it looks like 372 plus 20%, up to 335 plus 45, not 20%, just 20 flat out. Attack speed. 0.625 to 0.725, and the attack speed per level 2.25 to 2.30. The band, actually, off the top of my head, is that base mana actually down? Because that would be, what, 392, and this instead would be, what, 380? So I guess the mana is going down a little bit, but it looks like everything else is going up right there. So on the passive, the cleave AP ratio is going from 0.8 to 0.6, but new grants 20% movement speed on proc. Remove the 30 to 90% attack speed after casting a spell. Remove the 15% of AP as mana procced. Q still has a lot of previous changes in testing. The quality of life reveals fog of war on missile trip or tip, the trip of the missile. When you like throw it and it curves and like it hits it or whatever, it goes to the fog of war, it reveals. E, cooldown 26 to 18 to 20 to 12, and the R reset time is going from half a second to a full second. Last thing, the current iteration still has the R to Q reset removed. I'm hoping that, combined with her changes above, RQ near guaranteed Q damage is enough of a strength that Diana still sometimes opts into this combo without needing the gamble of a potential reset as an additional incentive. Note that none of this is final, so please share suggestions and ideas. The main consideration is that this work needs to stay low scope, so we can't include any visual effect changes or significant mechanics updates. This should stay as close as power neutral as possible, since our focus is making Diana feel better to play more than anything else. And for those that don't know, power neutral just means they're kind of shifting power around in the kit. If something's getting buffed, it's kind of with something getting nerfed, so that way she doesn't really change in a win rate or something, and then need to be nerfed overall later anyways, probably defeating the purpose of doing some of these changes. So if you ever heard that term right or say that term power neutral, they kind of want to make it so that they're doing changes that are significant and feel good, but ultimately don't make the champion have to be nerfed afterwards, if that makes sense. Last but not least, of course, is the Malphite changes. So here we go. And we kind of done a video about this and talked about this a little bit. These are kind of like an update, if anything else. So here we go. Hi, everyone. Appreciate the continued discussion around Malphite. Clearly he holds a special place in the hearts of a lot of people and was one of the first champions I ever played. I have a small update while we're at it. We're effectively mechanics locked in as this last iteration and have entered the tuning numbers tweaking phase. To that end, yesterday I did some bug fixes and I'm currently testing a minor base stat cleanup. Those should be on the PvE today. Riot Beardalox, like Goldilocks but beard, did an amazing job on updating Malphite's visual effects across all of his skins. Check them out if you haven't had a chance. And then 4, since this is an opportunistic change list, we don't have any specific patch release in mind, stay tuned. While not exhaustive, here's a breakdown of some of the major revisions I've made since posting the original change list. Still seeing a lot of people talking about the outdated values and mechanics, so I'd like to dispel some of that now. On the passive, Granite Shield, size scaling has been refactored to account for the massive armor values Malphite can get through his W. His growth spurt can now cap at 700 armor. Q, Seismic Shard, AP ratio reverted to live, cast time reverted to live. Q now checks if stealing movement speed will result in faster Malphite and uses that value in the rare cases when it does. W, Thundercap. The now much beloved 3x armor multiplier has been retained. Mana costs increased to 30 from 25. W sustained damage and dueling power potential was listed as a major red flag during internal testing, so it's seen the numbers of nerfs over the last 2 weeks. E, Ground Slam. Mana cost decreased at 10 at all ranks. Mana, now I'm saying both because I've been talking for so long. Here we go. Base stats. Here's the base stat cleanup I'm trying. Definitely no promises that these will all make it though, as they're almost all buffs and we're worried this update is already pushing Malphite pretty far. Goal was to further solidify Malphite as a definitive anti-AD tank while indirectly nerfing his late game AA damage potential, auto attacks by the way, which was getting pretty nuts when building Trinity Force Wits In. Attack speed growth reduced to 3 from 3.4, base armor increased from 40 to 37, armor growth increased to 4 from 3.75, and AP rounded up to 575 from 500 and, oh no, I read that wrong, not AP, HP rounded up from 575 from 574.2, which kind of made a little bit of sense. I was reading that like, wait, he just gets 575 AP? No, a death cap doesn't even give you that, just straight up. So there you go, Malphite, Diana, the Wukong changes, and the Zac changes with some context around them. This post is on the PBE if you want to read it for yourself. Of course, I did fumble a couple of words and such like that. I probably should have drank water or something before reading this long, this much. But anyways, with that being said, what do you think of the changes? Are you excited for any of these champions? Do you play any of them? And when you give your feedback, try to be as civil as possible. They tend to listen to your feedback when they have, you know, little to maybe no curse words in them. Just putting that out there. With that being said, that's all for this video. Thank you so much for watching this video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification, the actual subscribe button. But I don't know which video will be next, because life can have a lot of kinks. So until next time, take care. GG, get jinxed. Thank you for watching, and enjoy pizza responsibly.